Howdy, Simon here. Dev and I are off this week while there is a wee bit of a lull in the tennis calendar. In the meantime, let's turn our attention to Sir Andy Murray. It's hard to believe that the old gent is still going. And not just still going, he's had himself quite the season. If we turn the clock back to pandemic time in 2020, Dev and I took a deep dive into the finest male tennis player in modern British history. Enjoy, and we'll talk very, very soon.
There it is, Andy Murray, and you can see what it means to
I
him.
can cry like Roger, it's just a shame I can't play like him.
It was 3 aces and reached the world's number one.
History is made at the US Open.
Wimbledon champion again, a supreme performance, a first-class tournament. Andy Murray.
Andy Murray,
Andy Murray.
what a moment for the young Scot.
We may have seen the last professional match that Andy Murray will play on the ATP Tour.
It seems only fitting then that we take a look back at the career of possibly the greatest tennis player in British history.
With the greatest of respect to Virginia Wade and Fred Perry, I think that's probably a true statement. I think he probably goes down as the greatest of all time at this point.
Really slandering Greg Brzezinski here, Bush. I'm shocked.
And Tim Henman as well.
True.
And Carl Edmund, of course. You know.
Dan Evans, of course. Right.
Dan Evans, yeah. Come on, Evo, as he's wanted to say to himself. I've never heard of someone referring to themselves with their own nickname.
I feel like you watching him live in Vancouver really destroyed any possible love you could have of him.
He's really talented, though. That's the crazy thing about it.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a complete idiot, and he has a very strange body shape for a professional athlete.
Yelling at volunteers at a challenger event as well is not the greatest look, but he did
like a 9-year-old child at the side of the court, just yelling at them.
This is not how you endear yourself to the masses.
Not really, no. Someone who did, though, in a perfect segue, is Andy Murray. And we had some very sad news, or at least the potential of sad news, is that Andy Murray announced this past week in a press conference that the Australian Open would probably be his last tournament. It's not quite certain yet whether or not he's going to fully retire, but it seems certainly the direction of travel is heading in that direction.
So not feeling good. Obviously been struggling for a long time. I've been in a lot of pain for it's been probably about 20 months now. I've pretty much done everything that I could to try and get my hip feeling better, and hasn't helped loads. I'm in a better place than I was 6 months ago, but still in a lot of pain, it's been tough.
So we're going to look back over his career. Devang, just your top line thoughts about Andy Murray upon hearing that news last week.
Very sad, very sad. I think for me, Andy Murray was the most relatable player of the Big Four era, if that makes sense. A guy that just really worked his tail off and maybe wasn't blessed with some of the same God-given abilities that the other three had, but just was such a likable guy, and especially his views off the court and the way he carried himself. Just a remarkable human being, and then also a guy who was also a tremendous tennis player that probably could have won so many more slams if he had played in a different era, but unfortunately that wasn't the case.
We talked in an episode a while ago about enjoying the moment, and it doesn't seem any more fitting of the fact that Andy Murray was the world number one at the back end of 2016. You want to see how quickly things change in the sporting world.
It's a lifetime ago.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's a lifetime ago, long ago, but in the grand scheme of things, it's just 3 years ago. It's remarkable.
And I will say, even though I mentioned the era issue, Andy Murray won everything he wanted to win. You can make that argument. You can say that he got his first slam, and then he got Wimbledon, then he got Olympic gold medal. I think overall, it's just a tremendous career. But when we measure it against those other guys, it doesn't look as significant. But it was a massively huge career that will go down as one of the best, and he'll go down as one of the best ever, in my opinion. I don't know about you, Bush.
I would agree, yeah. And it seems very unfair to compare him against some of his peers when it comes to this, because as a nation, I mean, Britain obviously had its heyday in the sport in the very, very early days of the circuit, but since that point, I mean, on the women's side, we've had a few who've been up in the ranks, and with the greatest respect to Tim Henman and Greg Rosetsky, we haven't had a huge amount to shout on the men's side. So it was certainly interesting growing up with knowing that we're going to have a top player at the top of the game, and it seems almost sad now that we don't really have that. With, again, the greatest respect to Kyle Edmund, who is a great player in his own right. But let's just go through. I mean, it seems strange. Andy's not too much older than me in a lot of ways, maybe just a year or two older than me. So it seems strange looking back at the career of a player that I actually grew up watching, and that seems very odd to me. It's the same way that Theo Walcott has the same birthday as me and the exact same age. So when he retires, I'm going to feel very, very old. Someone who just crossed his 30th birthday, I feel horrendous already. So
not only like the fact that it's not fair to compare him to his peers and the guys who were part of his era, but he's retiring at a normal tennis age, right? Like when Pete Sampras retired, was around this age. You had Agassi, who was an outlier, but like a lot of the guys before Fed and Rafa and Novak were retiring here. So I think because they are still playing, it also makes it feel a little bit more difficult when in reality, this is not a significant outlier of when a player hangs it up.
No, you're not supposed to be in the quarterfinals and finals of slams when you're 37 years old. That's not what's supposed to happen.
So in another way, that's unfair to compare them. Andy is cursed by his presence in this era, but that's no fault of his own.
Murray's astonishing in his own right, just because of where he grew up. He grew up in Dunblane, and the Dunblane massacre and the school shootings, that he was present when that happened, and that has to have shaped his life in some capacity. I guess we can straight up call him a murderer at this point. Thomas Hamilton, he refers to him in his autobiography writing and saying that he actually knew him in person. His family gave rise to him in the car, and that's an astonishing.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that either.
But from that point, I mean, Murray's transition to actually being a professional tennis player, he's known as obviously he grew up in Scotland, but spent his primitive coaching days in Barcelona and actually grew up on the clay. And you can really see that in the way that he plays. He's not a traditional kind of player that you would see grow up in the UK in terms of the style. It looks very different than anything else. And in a lot of ways, he's just a very modern player. He's an example of what a very modern tennis player looks like. And that has to have come from that decision of when he was a kid to play in Barcelona, or move to Barcelona and play in that academy.
You know what I liken it to? I liken it to when English players move abroad in the football sense, not staying in England their whole careers and trying something new or trying something not more challenging, but something different. And that's kind of how Andy Murray came of age. And like you said, you can see it in his game. And I think his mother, Judy, is so progressive on so many fronts, but I think that doing that for Andy and also Jamie, who is a fantastic doubles player, that's a huge move. And like you could see that she knew that this would be better for both of them if they maybe took the road less traveled, and it clearly paid off.
I mean, you mentioned her progressive views in a lot of ways. That shines through in both Jamie and Andy in terms of how they represent themselves and how they hold themselves, especially in the case of Andy, is the compilations of him holding people accountable when it comes to things like women on tour, or it comes to like the way that journalists refer to the men's and women's games. I believe he's a 2-time winner of the Orange Bowl as well. I think only like 3 or 4 kids have ever done that, which is a very prestigious junior tournament. And of course, the thing that gave him the big announcement in the UK was him winning the Junior US Open in 2004. He won the BBC Young Sports Personality of the Year. He was a huge household name at this point. He was just 17 when that happened. And I think you could tell at that point he was going to be something really, really special.
It's funny, the amount of junior players that win a slam who don't turn out to really be anything is quite high. I would ballpark it like maybe only 20% of those players end up making a significant impact in the senior part, in the senior tour. But like you said, I think it was pretty clear that Murray had everything that you needed, and he wasn't just like a flash in the pan kid that maybe would peak when he was 17. He was only going to get better.
You mentioned someone who follows that trend very much is someone like Gael Monfils, right? Who won everything at the junior level. He won all 4 Grand Slams at junior level and dominated the sport as a 16-year-old.
Yeah.
Didn't really translate, did it?
But even that I would consider a good career. You know what I mean? Like there are some guys who never even got to what Monfils' level was. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I mean, the expectations are so high, right?
It's such a judgmental sport, if that makes sense, where it's like you're considered a bust if you did not win a slam or like win multiple majors. Whereas Gale had a good career where he won titles, but you're right, because he won multiple junior slams, you're like, well, the expectation is that should transition over. But all in all, he had a fantastic career.
What did you do, kid? You only got to top 20 in the world. It's
Suck.
unacceptable.
Jeez, you only have $50 million in career earnings? Really, man?
What do you ever achieve with your life? Suck.
Turns out sports fans are awful people, Bush. That's also what we've learned.
Well, I think we knew that anyway, right? As a whole, they're terrible people.
It's so unconstant that we can always reflect on.
Andy Murray, once he kind of turned pro in 2005, he made his first ATP Tour final at the Thailand Open where he faced Roger Federer. I remember this very specifically because I thought he was going to get slaughtered in that final. He actually held himself in, he did a pretty strong account of himself in that final. I remember it really distinctly.
The halcyon days of Fed playing the Thailand Open is wonderful. 2005, like he's not playing that tournament anymore, is he?
No, he might play like 9 tournaments this year if we're lucky.
I had a dream one day that he would play in Chennai or Mumbai, but I think that is long gone unless someone pays him an insane appearance fee.
It's crazy to think in 2005, Andy Murray became the British world number one. Sorry, the British number one. Didn't become the British world number one because that's not a thing. But in 2005, he ended Tim Henman's 7-year run. And of course, Greg Rosetsky was there as well.
Tim Henman's career winding up at this point as well, correct? So it was a true passing of the torch.
It definitely was, yeah. And he was the real star at this point. I think most people in the UK knew that he was going to be a real superstar. And I think one of the things to point out at this point is I'm not sure how well liked he was at this point. He was a very rambunctious teenager. He was a difficult kid to support on court for certain. He was very loud, very slammy with his rackets, and I don't think that really endeared himself to the crowd. I think it took a little while for people's opinions to really change about him and for his perception amongst the general public to change a little bit. I don't know. I actually don't know whether that opinion was shared wider than the UK. Is that how you perceived him at that point?
Yeah. I thought I saw a guy who yelled at himself a lot, which I thought was interesting. Super prone to outbursts, sometimes directed at his box as well, which I didn't particularly like. I think he learned a lot from Henman, though. I think Henman was a good guy to have as a role model because I think he also followed a bit of a similar path, Bush, and you probably know better than I do, where as he aged, he got more likable and people could kind of relate to him more. And I think Andy, as a youngster, was someone who you got the impression that he was spoiled maybe, or that he didn't respect his team or his opponent sometimes, but that definitely changed as he grew up.
Seems to be a parallel to a lot of things in life is that you just learn to appreciate the things that you have the longer they're around.
And Fed and Novak, I would argue, were the same way as well. I think Rafa was always probably well liked in that regard, but I think Roger and Novak had some things they had to iron out personality-wise to get where they were.
They did indeed. And speaking of the great man, Roger Federer, in 2006, he was on a 55-match winning streak on hard courts, which I think a 19-year-old Andy Murray broke that streak in Cincinnati. I remember this match as well. I remember watching it live and just thinking that this was really the moment that cemented it in my mind that he was going to be a real top player because he took Federer on and he didn't look overawed. He had that very defensive, athletic game at that point, but he was just a ball machine. You couldn't get anything past him. He was so athletic. He just moved around the court and had such excellent footwork. And then to be able to do that consistently, to be defensive, but to turn defense into attack in a counterpunching style. This is 2006 Roger Federer. So this is a guy who's moving up the court and smacking the living Jesus out of everything that moves. Astonishing victory.
There it is, Andy Murray, and you can see what it means to him. He's just beaten the world number one. What a moment for the young Scot. Federer out of Cincinnati, but that won't be the story tomorrow. It will be Andy Murray's victory.
He was like a backboard, right? Like you just the ability to cross the court and get everything back was frustrating as a Federer fan watching it because I'm like, this guy is not. He's not necessarily hitting insane winners. He's just not letting Fed end points, and that's something that would become a hallmark of Andy's career. And then I think he added some of the more depth shots and the game-breaking shots as he got older. But at this stage, he is just he's a menace. He cannot be stopped from getting that ball back. And I think that was what defined his early parts of his career.
I think it's a question maybe we can come on to the end as a thought starter I'll give to you now is that do you think Murray and Djokovic are very similar in terms of their play style and that one is just an exceptional exponent of it? Maybe one is just that tad stronger in terms of what he
totally
projected, but very, very similar game styles.
Totally. And I think just Novak has just got a little more in his arsenal, but very similar players.
So he broke into the top 10 for the first time. He won a tournament in San Jose, and then he finally made his breakthrough and got to the final of a Grand Slam at the US Open, which he lost to Roger Federer. And this was a straight sets loss. And I think the moment got a little bit too big for him at that point. He just didn't seem to handle the occasion very well.
I remember this because this is a very sad comment to make, but I remember this because I know what clothing Fed wore at all of his majors. And he wore like that red shirt with the gray shorts. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, I do. Yeah, I know.
Ooh, that's depressing. I remember very well, and you're totally right. Just overwhelmed by that moment. And this was back when they were still doing this, like they weren't doing Monday finals, so it was like right after the NFL games. It'd be right on 4 p.m. Bam, you're in New York. And I think just the moment caught to him.
He's definitely cemented at this point in 2008. I mean, he's only 20, but he's definitely cemented as one of the top players in the world, and he's fully made that transition. And I guess the narrative at that point was he will win a major, but when will it come? And the longer that it kind of stuck around and he got to the latter stages of tournaments, it's kind of stuck with him, really, that he wasn't able to break through. So I think you're starting to see that. And when he won Queens the next year, a lot was expected of him going into Wimbledon. And of course, you have this memorable moment of the first match played under the roof where I distinctly remember Stanislas Wawrinka coming out and just annihilating him in the first set and just completely obliterating Murray.
Hitting the piss out of the ball.
It's the fully worked out the kinks of what the roof actually looked like, and both players basically came off saying they were playing in a greenhouse. And it was like they were sweating profusely at the end of it. Andy Murray lost, of course, to Andy Roddick in the semi-final at Wimbledon that year. And again, that narrative of he was close, but not quite close enough to get through. And there's a lot of good players at that point in 2009. You're starting to see really that big three kind of cement themselves. And it's kind of whether or not he was able to break into that and become the big four. I think most any tennis fan at that point would absolutely say that he was part of that, but maybe the general public wouldn't have said that at that period of time.
I think there was skepticism that he could actually win the big match. And though he had won Masters series before and he'd won titles before, there was that disbelief that he could actually win a slam final. And fairly or unfairly, I think that was the most impressive part about Andy Murray to me, is that not only did he throw that monkey off his back, but he threw it into the sun, because he won some very big matches in astonishing ways as he finally made that breakthrough.
But one more time, just to reiterate the point, in 2010, he loses to Federer in the final, and you have this great moment of him crying, and the great quote that came out of it, "I could cry like Roger, and it's a shame I can't play like him."
I can cry like Roger, it's just a shame I can't play like him. I'd like to thank my team. I'm done, sorry.
That was the moment, though. Like, that's when people started to like him. I think that was
I agree. I completely agree.
It's such a classic moment where people are like, "Oh, this guy's funny and like nice and he's a charmer. Like, he's got everything. We shouldn't detest him."
Okay, so speaking of people that you should detest in a lot of ways, do you think that this is, looking back, this was a desperation play from Murray? Is that too harsh of a statement to say when he hired Lendl as coach? Or do you think this was just, I need a new voice?
I don't know the inside story, but I wonder if how much of a role Judy had in bringing Lendl, someone like him, in, because fire and ice, and also I'm not totally sure Andy Murray would have been completely down with this, if you know what I mean. Like, I don't know if he would think he would have to do something like this, but from an outsider's perspective, and maybe his camp as well, they're like, we need to bring someone else in who has a different voice, because currently you're a great player, but you're not at that next level that you can definitely get to.
And so much of it must have been a mentality with him as well, and who better to bring into the camp than the ultimate
the ultimate competitor. And also,
case.
it's not like he needed his game to get better, right? Like, I think a lot of these coaching appointments for guys who are already at that top level, it is mostly mental, right? It's mostly about thinking the game rather than actually working on the game, if that makes sense.
It does. In 2012 at Wimbledon, he made it to the final. He lost to Roger Federer, and then just a month later on the very same court in 2012, he won Olympic gold. And it was obviously the biggest title of his career at that point, and he didn't just win it, he completely annihilated Federer in the final of that Olympics.
Match point in the gold medal match at the Olympic Games. And it was 3 aces to win it and beat the world's number one.
It was a cursed image seeing people in colors on that Wimbledon court, but it was.
Oh God, get rid of it.
That was the only weird part. It was really weird watching Roger get bossed off the court at Wimbledon because you just never had seen that before. But what a performance, and also definitely the start of things to come for Andy.
Later that year at the US Open, he finally got the monkey off his back. He defeated Novak Djokovic in 5 sets in a truly thrilling final to win the US Open.
What a match.
History is made at the US Open. Andy Murray, the first British male winner of a Grand Slam for 76 years.
It was incredible, wasn't it? And I mean, your heart goes out to him because it took so much longer than I think people expected of him. This is 4 years after he made his first Grand Slam final, so it must have felt like an eternity for this poor dude who's knocking on the door forever and ever. But what a way to get it done over 5 grueling sets against, I mean, you want to talk about the ultimate grinder and the ultimate kind of competitor. Djokovic is exactly that, and he was not going to go down without a fight. Still astonishing that Murray won that match looking back at it.
I still don't really believe it. I thought he was dead in the water several times in that match, but and I think this wasn't one of those Monday finals that they had to move. Just incredible. I'm still kind of in disbelief that he pulled this one off because, like you said, at many points that I just did not believe he could do this against Novak.
He won his first Wimbledon in 2013, becoming the first British men's single winner since Fred Perry in 1936. You want to know how long it's been since a certain country had managed to win their home Grand Slam. It was a very, very long time, and he deserved it. He was the best player on grass that year, and he deserved to win the title.
I don't know whether you realise what you've done, but boy, how does it feel to hold that trophy now?
Yeah, it feels slightly different to last year. Last year was one of the toughest moments in my career. So to manage to win the tournament today, it was unbelievably tough match. So many long games, and I don't know how I managed to come through that final game. It was unbelievable from 3 match points. So I'm just so glad to finally do this.
What a wonderful moment for himself and his family as well. I think this is the big one. This is the one they really wanted, even though he won gold on this court as well. I think putting his name in that Wimbledon history book was such a massive moment for the sport. And I think and you obviously would know better than I would, Bush, but I think as a nation or as a country, this was so significant. And it elevated Andy Murray into that really higher tier of not just an athlete, but as a person in that nation.
Without a doubt. He was already a household name at that point, but this really just did cement his legacy.
They're going to knight this guy at some point, right? Like that's
Well, yes. How little do they know? We can come on to that shortly. But no, I think the thing about him is we've spoken about this at length on this podcast about how important representation is and about how just having someone in the spotlight, someone who's good, it doesn't matter whether, black, white, man, woman, whatever it is, but just having someone who's really good at something really does help. And I think in the UK, they were screaming out for another really, really good, transcendent kind of talent, and he really was that. And winning Wimbledon was such a big feel-good moment for the country, and I think it just, if anything, just inspiring more kids to pick up a tennis racket just has to be a good thing. And if that's the one thing that he can take away from his career is that he actually inspired a nation and a bunch of kids to play the sport, then it's got to be a pretty damn good thing in a lot of ways.
He definitely did too. I think a similar experience that I had was when Mike Weir won the Masters. I think you saw a lot more kids playing golf. Like a moment like that is huge because you're seeing someone from your own country be able to get to the pinnacle of the sport. So Little things like that, which aren't so little, end up having huge impacts.
I think post 2013, you have this situation where you have him dealing with injuries back and forth, and it wasn't until really 2016 that you really do get the peak of his career. He wins gold. He beats Del Potro in the final in another astonishing final to win Olympic gold.
On a bit of an aside, that Del Potro Nadal semifinal was insane. That was one of the more insane things I've ever seen.
I think that one could go down maybe as one of the greatest matches of all time. It doesn't get spoken of that often, but it was just astonishing.
There are moments in that match where you think Del Potro might actually die, and he somehow comes back to beat Nadal. You're like, how?
Del Potro has a habit of looking like he's going to die on court pretty much
Looking
like
like
90%
he's
of
not
the time.
enjoying any part of this at all. He somehow wills himself to get there.
And it's funny because he's playing Rafael Nadal at the other end. He just somehow wills himself over the finish line. He beats our favorite son, Milos Raonic, in the final of Wimbledon to become a two-time Wimbledon champion in that summer as well. Fair play to Raonic to getting to that final. This is, of course, the infamous moment of Federer being strewn on
the back.
the back on the floor.
When we definitely were like, all right, Fed is done. This is over. And then
little do we know that he comes back and wins 2 more Grand Slams.
Three more, I think, or 2 more.
3 more. Sorry, 3 more. Excuse me. I'm selling him short on this one. Murray became the world number 1 at the back end of the year. He won the Paris Masters title and he finished as the world number 1. And he also won the World Tour finals. I mean, what a year. And I said at the start of the podcast, right? It's difficult to believe that this was 2016. This is not a very, very long time ago, the back end of 2016. And this guy is on the verge of retiring. And he just won everything you can possibly imagine in the year of 2016. Astonishing, really.
It's sad. It's sad because someone else we talked about, Juan Martín del Potro, is also in a situation where you're not sure how he's going to look like when he comes back. Injury has just really killed this group.
Andy Murray was knighted in 2017 in the New Year's Honors, the Queen's New Year's Honors. He, a very fitting recipient of a knighthood. He did so much for the sport of tennis in the UK and so much to charity. It was a very well-deserved knighthood, and it feels very strange to call him a sir at the age of 31, but that's what he became, and very well earned, I would say. So we mentioned off the top that he lost at the Australian Open to Roberto Bautista. Oh my goodness. You're going to have to help me with Bautista Agut.
You got it.
Is that my best Spanish pronunciation?
Yeah.
What a way to go out. And I think his Instagram post really sums it up, right? If you look through his history, he kind of summed up perfectly.
I love that he used that photo of him scowling at Novak Djokovic after that final in Australia. I'm like, that just sums up Andy Murray perfectly. Just a guy who can play a joke and like just take a joke, and just a all around good dude.
What prizes for him actually getting a second hip surgery and coming back, do you think? I know it's a long shot, and I know stranger things have happened. I think Mike Bryan is an example of this actually happening, of having similar surgery and coming back to win a Grand Slam. It does not sound, from hearing Andy Murray talk, that he's really down for that.
No, and I wonder if he mentioned like quality of life reasons he might do it anyways to get the surgery. But yeah, I have a hard time believing that he will come back. I think he's a really smart guy as well, so I don't think he would do something that would maybe set him up for some negative consequences in the future. So I think he'll play Wimbledon, and then that's it.
I would be surprised if he gets to Wimbledon. He looked in extreme pain at the end of that match.
I like he just probably shouldn't play at all in between, right? Like there's no need to really.
No, just go home, relax, try and get ready, get healthy, play a couple of matches. You might play Queens or something just to get used to the grass of competitive playing again, but it looks like it's done to me. And stranger things have happened in the world of sport. I've been proven wrong many, many times, but this one feels like it's dead in the water. And if it is the end of the career, what a fantastic way to finish in terms of a final match. But if it isn't, so be it. Like, go out and have fun at Wimbledon. Just go and shoot and see what happens.
Totally. I mean, he has nothing to prove to anyone. He's done it all. Just a remarkable career, and he has earned the right to go out on his own terms and however he wants to do it. I'm glad he got to play this match here, because I think after that practice match with Novak, it really looked bad, and like Novak was like, I'm not sure this guy's going to be able to play. Like, that's how negative it was looking. So for him to even get that match, get that moment in front of an adoring crowd, I think it's really cool to see.
Thanks, Devang. Good to talk to you. We will speak to the rest of you next week.
aces